What is up? This year, LA in a minute, and I'm out here in Newhall at a site that's so significant that it was the first location in Los Angeles ever added to the National Register of Historic Places. In a special episode brought to you by Culver City Toyota, talking about Pico Canyon oil well number 4, which was the first commercial oil well in Los Angeles, and the oil well that led to LA becoming the oil capital of the world. Let's get into it. First off, I got to say thank you to my friend Eton from Eton Does LA for doing the major legwork on this episode. Make sure you give him a follow. Eton Does LA. He's awesome. First and foremost, Pico Oil Well number 4 is way out here. It's miles west of Newhall, and it's about a mile and a half up an uphill road past Mentryville, which is now a ghost town that Charles Mentry built in the 1930s to house employees that worked at this very productive well/oil field. Now, oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859, and speculators on the West Coast thought that California might have this black gold. And in fact, more than 300 mining claims were established in this area west of Newhall between 1865 and 1867, but the black gold rush never materialized. Now, as the story goes, a Mexican hunter named Ramon Perea was chasing a wounded deer into this area in the canyons in 1865. The deer disappeared behind a body of water which had an oily green sheen on it. Surmising that this oily green water might be something different or special, Perea filled his canteen with the material, brought it back to the Mission San Fernando, where Dr. Vincent Gilsich identified it as petroleum. What Gilsich did next was form an exploration company, and he offered Perea a stake in that company. Perea said, "No, I think the risk is too high," and took an offer of cash and a barrel of booze instead, and went on his way. Gilsich was never able to put anything substantial together, and he gave up the claim. So by the 1870s, 3 veteran Pennsylvania oil men, Robert McPherson, John Baker, and Denton Scott, decided to start exploring in the Pico Canyon area again. They hired Charles Mentry to start the dig, and Pico Oil Well number 1 did strike oil. Oil well number 1 struck oil, but it was by no means a gusher. It only produced about 12 barrels a day. But it was enough to pique the men's interest, and they started Pico Oil Well number 2 and Pico Oil Well number 3. Again, not commercially successful, but enough that they formed an investment group from San Francisco, and along with Charles Mentry, dug Pico Oil Well number 4, which was indeed a gusher. By July of 1876, they were producing 25 barrels a day. By November of the next year, they were producing 70 barrels a day, enough to have an outright success story. In fact, they had so much oil that they built the Pioneer Oil Refinery right on the Southern Pacific Railroad, right there in Newhall. The men kept at it, and the well kept producing. And by 1879, they built California's first oil pipeline, the remnants of which you could still see right here in the canyon. As Pico Canyon Oil Well number 4 and Pioneer Oil Refinery kept producing, Los Angeles developed into the world's oil capital. Doheny discovered oil in downtown Los Angeles in the 1890s. The Salt Lake oil field, the Inglewood oil field. Los Angeles was the biggest urban oil field in the world. And in fact, by the 1920s, LA was producing a quarter of the world's oil. Wow! So Pioneer Oil Refinery and Pico Oil Well number 4 were acquired by Standard Oil in 1901, which became Chevron in 1977. And even in 1977, the well was still producing. In fact, Pico Canyon Oil Well was still producing until 1990, 114 years, giving it a claim as the most productive oil well in the history of the world. Wow! Again, today oil wells are all over Los Angeles, and LA still produces a lot of oil. But this is a big deal. In 1966, Pico Oil Well number 4 was the first place in LA County to receive Registered National Historic Landmark status. So in a special episode brought to you by Culver City Toyota, Los Angeles was at one point the oil capital of the world. And in fact, it's still the largest urban oil field on the planet. And that all started here in Newhall at Pico Canyon Oil Well number 4. All right, LA, it's been a minute.